And let me say first, of course, good day, students. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you here today about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, near and dear to the hearts of many of our clients, and hopefully, if not already, near and dear to your hearts, and that is the subject of, there it is, you see it, integrated estate planning. I know you've already heard about asset protection planning, and I am, of course, going to be talking about asset protection planning, but I'm going to be talking about it in a little different context, and that is the context of integrated estate planning. And that is in the context of perhaps an overall more holistic approach to the estate plan as opposed to what might be referenced as sole purpose asset protection planning. So let me start then by speaking with you about what is integrated estate planning. And as you can see on the camera, my definition is the result of the marriage between traditional estate planning and asset protection. Traditional estate planning tends to focus on what happens when somebody dies. And we all know very well what happens when somebody dies. They're dead. With asset protection planning, the focus is more on the lifetime side of the estate plan. That is to say, the focus is on making sure that we can implement those strategies, take into account, put in place those steps, so that if and when something happens, if and when there's a problem, then the estate will be protected. So the focus is on protecting the estate during the lifetime of the client. If you ask 100 clients what's more important, what happens to their assets while they're alive or what happens to their assets once they pass on, probably the majority will say during their life, because they would like to have their assets around for them to enjoy them while they're alive. As the old saying goes, you can't take it with you, and as far as we know, that still remains to be the case. So what is integrated estate planning? It's the marriage of traditional estate planning, again, where the focus usually is on things like probate avoidance, tax minimization, avoiding family disruption, keeping family harmony, smooth transition of property, and so on. The marriage between traditional estate planning and then asset protection planning, where the focus is more on what happens to the assets during one's lifetime. Protecting those assets should something happen down the road. To me, it's very much like an all-perils insurance policy, the asset protection component, that is, of the estate plan. Meaning, it's something that needs to be put in place at a time when we're free to put it in place because there's nothing pending, threatened, or expected creditor-wise. And in the absence of something pending, threatened, or expected creditor-wise, our legal system does favor the free alienability of property, meaning we're free to do with our property as we see fit. We can give it away, we can burn it, we can consume it, absent somebody entitled to a remedy under applicable fraudulent transfer law. So given that we're free to do with our property as we see fit, we might as well organize the property in one form or another, the holding of the property, so that should something happen, and we hope it never does, but should something happen, the property is more protected than it otherwise would be. That is the nature of the planning. Let me be very clear, it is not scrambling when it's too late to move property out of the reach of a claimant, or worse yet, out of the reach of a judgment creditor. So I view this very much, whether we're talking domestic planning, which you've already heard some about, whether we're talking foreign-based planning, which I'll be focusing on, I prefer to think in terms of an all-perils insurance policy. The client puts it in place at a time he or she is free to take out this sort of a policy, and the policy then is hopefully never needed because we never have a problem that we have to be concerned with. But if a problem does develop, then we have this all-perils policy in place. What is the asset protection component, then, of integrated estate planning? My definition is the process of organizing one's assets and affairs in advance so as to preserve the estate in view of risks to which the assets are subject. Now, there's a couple of key items here in the definition. Number one, organizing one's estate and affairs. All we're simply saying is property is either more or less vulnerable depending on how it is held. A wealthy physician, a wealthy lawyer, a wealthy architect, these persons may have assets that, if held in their own name, titled in their own respective names, then should something happen and there's a legal liability, it's a sure thing they're going to be lost. Now, those assets might then be held in joint ownership with a spouse, might be held in the form of a family limited partnership.